his last book, Fascinating Hindutva, which came out, I think, in 2009 and or 10, many of the things or the questions which he raised in that book now gets sort of like further elaboration in a Republic of Hindutva. What Professor Badri Narayan did, just to summarize, not summarize, but in one line, what he started in Fascinating Hindutva is basically, he says that there is a space which exists between history and myth, right? And that space is basically being used by RSS and Hindutva forces to mobilize a section of society today. And after the rise of BJP in 2014, these things have become much more visible to everyone. Perhaps Professor Badri Narayan was one of the first one to see this trend emerging when he wrote Fascinating Hindutva. So what we are going to do today is I will request Professor Badri Narayan to give us a short summary of the book. Not just the book. In a way, what I'm basically asking him to do three things. One, his own intellectual journey in last 10 years, because this project basically is a culmination of 10 years. Second, the journey of RSS and BJP, how it's changed in last 10, 15 years, because those who have read his book, he has a very interesting line in the first chapter, which he says that, I don't remember the chapter, but what the critiques of RSS and BJP are doing, they are basically attacking the shadow of RSS and BJP. They don't really understand how RSS and BJP is continuously changing and adapting to the situation. So the journey of RSS and BJP. And third, while doing so, the journey of Indian democracy, where we are today and where we are heading. And then I'll ask my other fellow panelists to reflect on his book and what is happening in the country. Professor Badri.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for organizing this discussion on the book. And I'm really very glad to see all of the friends here, those who are going to speak on that. This is very difficult job which you have offered to me. And I'm taking help of Rola Barth to save myself, that the text unity begins not with the origin, but with the destination. And destination is are you people. And you may know better than what I have said in the book than me, because sometimes author has his own bias, and through that biases author interpret his text. But anyway, I'm trying to say something. In 2002, I have started working. Actually, I used to work on Dalit communities, marginal communities in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. That is my field area. And while working in the field, when I was trying to understand Bahujan movement, I saw there is another stream is working and growing among them, that is the Hindutva movement. And both started at same time in the decade of 90s, Bahujan movement in Uttar Pradesh and the Hindutva movement, Ram Janmabhoomi and all. Ram Janmabhoomi Hindutva movement is older, but Ram Janmabhoomi movement gave a new meaning to Hindutva movement that time, and both were working among the Dalit communities. And I tried to see how they are working because I got a feel in the field that this is another stream which is mobilizing Dalits based on through various ways in that history, the sense of identity, sense of dignity. And it was very interesting, the dialogue between Bahujan movement and Hindutva movement. Many things, and it was unsaid dialogue, untold dialogue. Many things was produced by the Bahujan movement is being used by the Hindutva movement today. Today means not today, means 20 years, 15 years, a longer period of 15 years. Like many icons, many heroes, many histories, species of histories, were produced by, invented by Kanshiram during his movement. And they have used, they have recreated, retold those things. So what I tried to observe that the things which was at the mobilizational level those time, now filter down deeper and it entered in the what I call social bhav, Hindutva social bhav. Social bhav means it's not only mobilization, it's not only a movemental thing, but it is deepening in the psyche of it. And when I say, and through this Hindutva social bhav, another kind of things is emerging, and that is I told common sense, no? Hindutva common sense. Now you are only a phrase is needed to make yourself mobilize, popularize, or you don't need political action for that because already things are in your mind, and it's become part of common sense. And it was not happening among Dalit only, uh, uh, other communities also. You know better than me the entire middle class, the whole upper caste, everywhere. Hindutva public sphere is being created, and I say it's a project of making own public, Hindutva public, and this public, the making of this public is continuing, and this public is being created through groundwork, through politics in which I talked, social politics. This social politics, notion of social politics emerged from Sangh tradition, and it was used by Narendra Modi in his politics. I have discussed about that, and also Adityanath, the entire cultural politics around Ganga, no? uh, Madhumi, Kumbh Mela, various kinds of things. So I see the resources generated by the cultural resources generated by the sun reflect in the politics of BJP. Maybe after 10 years, maybe after 15 years, maybe after 20 years. It does not work together immediately. It takes some time. I don't know this making this process, how, why, and how this thing influenced BJP, because I have not worked more on the BJP, so I don't have idea how it's entered in that, penetrate in that, in which way. But as we know that Sangh has a direct indirect relation with it, and there are cadres who Sangh leads. They may work as catalysts to keep this take further these ideas. Like you see the entire mobilization around Suhaldev, and this started I think in 1950, and RSS entered in that story in the 60s, 70s, and I tried to document this phenomena in 2002, and it came in the politics of BJP when people started knowing about that, when Amit Shah started a train and the statue making and everything is in a big way now they are doing. So see how much time it took. RSS was working in 2002 around that myth because I observed in 2002. They may have been working maybe before that, but I observed in that period. So I can say, and it came in the culmination now in a bigger way. So media and academics now started talking. So I see the resources, cultural resources generated by RSS sometime after some time are being used, not all, some of them by the BJP. So this relation is not very direct. It's very indirect. It's maybe influences, relationship of the influences. And I don't know much about that, but that's the tune of mystery about me. And also, I begin with the statement about Sangh. This book, that Sangh is a tip of iceberg. Whatever we know is very less. There are more than that, which is invisible. And I also say it's also it's a myth and also reality. And so this relationship we need to understand during the formation. And what I also observed that there are two ways to see the sun. One is through ideas, through books, through statements, through, and other is the practice, no, at the grassroots, where one of the Hindi poets says, "Jahan anaj pakta hai, no? Jahan politics banti hai." You need to see that ground where politics is being reconstructed and remade. So, wahan par you can find various nuances, various ways they are working, and sometimes you can find very creative ways And when we analyze an academician and journalist, or as we only see what is visible and what is coming to us through their sources and our observation. Then I moved towards in this book to see this entire making of the Hindutva public sphere. And in the making of this Hindutva public sphere, two things are very important. One is their networking with the Hindu religious public spheres, like Kathakar, Pravachan Kartaj, various popular sects, Braj Mandal, Neetkar Mandal, Ramlila Mandali, various kinds of the organizations who are working for disseminating Hindu cultural traditions, and they make their networking with them, and they create very good interactions with them. It's a kind of family kind of interactions also. So they are not sung, but they're part of their discourse, and not directly. You don't say that you are part of sung and whatever, but you are here and you are part. So that linkages is very important in creating this public sphere. And second is the form of the language which RSS Pracharaks used in their discourses. And that language is, I say, has an echo of 5,000 years of the language of the traditions. And that language creates a memory linkage to the community, especially Hindu community. So whenever they speak, Vrat, Chet Puja, this, that, that very easy to understand people of the rural areas, especially, and also the Kasbaj people and this urban people. Second is the tone and tenor of language. And that tone and tenor they used to take from the Hindu Katha traditions. Hindu Katha traditions means Satyanarayan Vrat Katha, Bhagavad Puran Katha, Murari Bapu Katha. If you listen a Pracharak in his body key, sometimes you feel that you are listening to Pravachan. Pravachan not in negative sense, Pravachan in positive sense, because it brings you in a grip. It influences you in a big way. It enters in your memory lane. So in the creation of social bhav, or entering their message to the social bhav, these two things are very important. They are networking with the Hindu cultural organizations, groups, traditional cultural groups, and second in their ways of communications, their language. And then this entire project goes. And this project, now the question of democracy, you know better than me, and maybe you can reflect on this question. Where our democracy is going to, what is the direction of our democracy, which we are going to see in the future. But I see Hindutva social bhav will reshape our democracy one way or another way. I am not very sure in which direction it will go. But and third thing which I observed, that is there also mastery, that one can see mastery in the various Pracharaks. That is synthesizing of poets, working with the poets. And for that, Sangh redefined itself. I used to say the Sangh has no fundamentals. They have foundations. It has foundations, but no fundamentals. So that's why it's very easily they can transform themselves. Transform is maybe not right word, and Sabha may not agree with that word. But they redefine themselves to go further, to include others. And this trend you can observe in them in the decade after decade of 90. It became faster. The process of redefinition became faster after 90s, especially in the decade of 90s. Although it started with Neura's time, but after 90, because of various influences, because of their interaction with the diaspora, the modernity, the market, the technology, it all affected. And the making of the Sangh. The Sangh is also transition, because Sangh can't be a pathar, a stone. It has to change, and it is changing. And so in the last chapter, which is the epilogue, I am dealing this entire process of making of Hindutva public, which was going on. And then this coronavirus came and it ruptured the entire process. And it brought this bios public in the center of, our society. And the process of getting of Hindutva public sometimes stopped there. But sung through their various Shivaka uh, uh, forced link to fill up that gap. And when the time will be normal, we can again start with a project of making it for public. And I also say this is unfinished project. This is always ongoing project. And it's very difficult to see. And I also see it's not very easy to transform caste into Hindutva narrative, although they are doing very efficiently and effectively in many parts of the society. But I see that this contestation will remain because both identity will remain together. And the Sangh and the Hindutva discourse try to transform caste into Hindutva location, and the political party, those who are doing caste politics, or caste politics not overtly, not obviously, like Samajwadi Party and the BSP, because they believe that caste, BSP believes in principle that caste, Kashiram used to say, Jati se Jati kato, and that was his slogan. So they would try to evoke caste and take the caste in their own directions. Mobilization of caste as a caste, marginal caste or oppressed caste for their emancipation. And on another way, Hindutva project, we try to convert caste to the Hindutva narrative of Hindutva bigger agenda or whatever. I'm not saying that, and I'm not the person who is their intimate person or internal person or Pravakta or whatever. That their सभा we were अच्छा अभी बाद में बोलेंगे
बाद में हम लोग बहस कर लेंगे
बहस करेंगे
हाँ जी हम लोग बहस करेंगे अलग से
Okay.
So here I'm going to stop Rahul. Another can respond.
Thank you so much. Varghese, I would like to bring you in here. And before that, just an announcement. People who have questions, put your questions on Q&A box. And I will basically use some of those questions while basically bringing in panelists and also asking questions to Professor Badri Narayan. Varghese, you have been writing about this subject, Hindutva and caste and Dalit. In fact, I remember one article which you wrote in just before 2014 elections on the Hindutva project and the caste and especially how there is contradiction between Hindutva and Dalit project. And then just before 2019 elections, you said why there might be some ruptures or crisis appearing in the Hindutva and caste project. So what I would like you to, one, reflect on Badriji's book and also add to where you think this Hindutva and caste project is heading towards.
Well, thank you, Rahul. And it is a great honor to be on this panel with four of you. I think all of you have written so much on this topic that I have been great admirers of all of them. And particularly Amit Ahuja's recent book, it was a delight reading that and reflecting on some of the points that he made there. And Badri's book, very provocative, very stimulating, and it's a breeze. Reading it was, it's really enjoyable, and it does not exhaust you, where it actually provokes you to think through some of the suggestions that he's making. Very fundamentally, he's restating some facts about 2014 election. That is something that I must mention here, because 2014 election was interpreted as some kind of a departure from Hindutva by a significant segment of commentators in India and abroad, which wasn't the case. There was no evidence during the 2014 campaign to make that case. Somehow people tried to imagine or project things that they thought should be done to the BJP into the 2014 campaign, and a story was made out. But there were facts then which were to the contrary. 2014 was a triumph of Hindutva, and Badri makes that point. And he, in fact, I have to mention here how the then BJP president camped in Ayodhya to make the point that Ayodhya and the Ram Janmabhoomi temple was a very critical point in the campaign. So So very few people actually had said that in 2014. One of them was none other than Steve Bannon, who said that the 2014 election was a triumph of Indian Hindu nationalism. So no other American commentators could actually spot what was coming in India. This was much before he himself had joined the Trump movement, etc. So that is one point that I must state here, how Badri makes that point. And then the point that you made, Rahul, is about how, I'm in total agreement with his point that most of the opponents of the RSS are actually fighting an image that they have built. Now, RSS is a moving target. It keeps evolving. It takes many forms and many shapes. He himself narrates the number of organizations, the number of frontal organizations that it spawns all over. And always there is a deniability. There is always a possibility of ownership. That's the third factor of the fact about the book is within that evolution. He speaks about the technology, how it relates with technology and modernism. And of course, there is but that evolution, whether it is a unidimensional linear evolution or there are multiple facets of that evolution itself, is something that we could reflect upon. Because you remember in 2017 when Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Mr. Adityanath came to Noida, if you recall, Prime Minister's speech was about he was the first Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh who had the courage to challenge the jinx associated with Noida, that if Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister, so he spoke about how we should be against superstitions and all that thing. He is a man in a religious robe, but that does not mean that he's a man of superstitions, he said. But also on another front, another evolution, if you look at on cow protection, from Savarkar's very derisive attitude towards cow protection, now we have perhaps traveled, the RSS has traveled, or the Sangh Parivar has traveled in the opposite direction. So the evolution may not be in a very linear manner. There are multiple facets of that revolution one could face. So anyway, Badri makes a point that the riots or violence associated with the Hindutva movement is something that the RSS is disowning. And I would go as far as to take that on face value as a discussion point. But then we will have to actually seek for an explanation for the violence. He himself sort of catalogs and explains, for example, 600 incidents of small violent incidents in Uttar Pradesh ahead of 2014. Apu Esto Suresh, the Indian Express reporter, then he made a detailed investigation into that thing. So this was, as Badri would agree, this was the same thing in Bihar also, somewhere. So, but it's the same. The point that we are all reflecting today is, through all this thing, how is a new Hindu unity being forged and how it is reshaping Indian democracy itself. So Badri makes that point in the book that there's a new term of engagement being proposed to Dalits. To a great extent, that is all Dalits and backwards, of course. To a great extent, that is true vis-a-vis Muslims also. When we speak about the RSS evolving, I think there is a new social contract, I would say, being proposed vis-a-vis the backward caste, the Dalits, and the Muslims. Now, what are the terms of that engagement? There are certain indicators here. I will very quickly refer to this distinction between samajik samrasta as opposed to samajik nyaya, as in the caste politics in India is being driven by the slogan of samajik nyaya, social justice. Whereas here, the emphasis is on harmony. Harmony does not necessarily include the idea of justice. Harmony does not necessarily exclude the possibility of hierarchy, the possibility of even oppression. That all can be in that idea of samajik samrasta as opposed to samajik nyaya. So I would refer to another conversation on the same topic Dinesh Krishnan's RSS, The Deep Nation, where he cites this conversation with Dattobang Tengdi. There was a specific reason why sammata, as in socialism or equality, that was a word that the RSS considered when they launched the Samajik Samarastha Manch in 1983. So Mr. Tengdi explains why that word was removed and Samarastha Manch became the thing. So his explanation was that it was more of a leftist connotation. We did not want to get trapped into an allegation that, okay, we are now turned leftist, so therefore we went for Samarastha, and then the harmony part gets the same. So now, how much time do I have, Rahul?
2-3 minutes.
2-3 minutes. Okay. So in that case, I will very quickly conclude by, so the idea of harmony does not preclude any of, it does not promise addressing the issue of justice or other questions that have been raised by Ambedkarite politics, etc. And there is a way in which the caste aspirations can be accommodated within the Hindutva thing. But however, if there is a challenge to the way the Hindutva idea of Hindus' social unity is challenged because of an alternative mode of rebellion or articulation, then there is a very severe repercussion. There is a severe response to that thing. We don't need to go into details there, but what is happening to autonomous Dalits movement across the country is a telling example of how that response could come. From Bhima Koregaon to many other instances we can talk about that also. So there is a mechanism in which caste aspirations can be accommodated that may not work in the case of highly assertive and mobilized castes like Jats or Gurjars. Dealing with them would be not as easy as dealing with a left-leaning secular or with people without or the Ambedkarite politics. So I will conclude with a very brief summary of a speech that the RSS chief had made on December 3rd of 2020. So this was the role of India in a global perspective. It was a critique of liberal democracy. So he said, liberal democracies or the philosophy of liberal democracy rejected nationalism and culture, and they had a run which is now come to a crisis. Now the world over, there is a going back, a return to the idea that there should be culture, there should be nationalism, there should be a search for the roots. So there he says, see, the balance between individualism and collective social goals, that has been disrupted by individualism and capitalism and materialism. And here is a philosophy which is thrived here. He says that at least for 2000 years, we have had a philosophical outlook and a way of living which balanced materialism and spiritualism, individualism and socialism. All that put together is what he says that is called dharma, of which religion is one part of dharma, but dharma is a larger concept where Vyakti and the Samaj, the individual and the society, are in perfect harmony. And he goes on to explain, everyone's activities is disciplined, everyone is stabilized in their own duties and obligations to society, to remain in balance with the interest of the society and the environment. And he makes a point about redistribution. The wealth creation is not about amassing wealth for oneself. Wealth is to be created, to be redistributed. So he was giving a very clear narration on what a collective should mean in a Hindutva mode. There is order, there is harmony, there is an obligation that an individual has to the society, and social goals gets precedence over individual rights. And that is visible throughout the set of government policies from the legal framework, laws on marriages to laws on religious conversions, so on and so forth. So that my final point. I'm jumping, so therefore sorry for sounding a little discontinuous here. So that I'll suddenly jump to the point that Badri made on a new public, the idea of a new public space that Hindutva has created. Now, there is a challenge to the imagination of India according to the Hindutva Republic, or as the Hindutva Republic itself. If the challenges come from outside of that universe, which, as I mentioned, maybe it could be Ambedkarite politics, it could be leftist, it could be Maoist, it could be anything that is outside that thing. There will be major repercussions, including from the instrument of the state. But when it comes from within that ecosystem, because that ecosystem is no longer controlled by one unit. That also Badri actually mentions about it. When violence erupts, there is a very telling quote about an RSS Pracharak lamenting about the idea that, okay, we cannot control them. I mean, we do not know what to do with them. Now, this is the month of Ramzan. Last year, Prime Minister Modi issued a tweet on the first day of Ramzan, wishing everybody a happy Ramzan. The most vicious attack on the Prime Minister's timeline came from some of the ardent followers of the Prime Minister, who he himself follows on Twitter. They went after him. So much so that, okay, who are you to wish a happy Ramzan, etc., so on and so forth. A day before he wished it again, but when I looked up, there wasn't that kind of a vicious attack on him. The point I was trying to say is that there is a new common sense which has been created. It is like it's like a BOT model: build, operate, transfer. So it has been built, it has been in operation, it is now been sort of transferred into a larger public domain where it may not be in the command of anybody or in the control of anybody. It is like a child who is grown into an adult and outgrown the parental counsel. I will leave it at that. So that could perhaps be the new common sense of the Republic of Hindutva. Congratulations again, Badri, for a fantastic book. I really thoroughly enjoyed reading your book and looking forward to the rest of this conversation.
Thank you, Vargi. If I can bring in Sabaji now, you've been following BJP and RSS for a while now. My first question would be, how do you see the work of RSS and BJP on the ground differently from Badri Narayan's description? The second question would be a lot to do with what Vargi spoke in his comments, that a new social contract is being offered. Now, this contract is being, like, the contents of this contract is going to be different for different communities, right? And how are these communities negotiating with this new social contract? And what is the reason if the RSS and BJP is offering, a differential contract to everyone?
So hi Rahul, hello everybody here. It's an honor for me to be here. I think this is a very, very important book. In its own, it's a very quick read. It's very important because I'm a reporter fundamentally. I may write opinion columns, and in the last piece that I wrote, sorry to introduce myself here, which was the newspaper, The Telegraph. I had traveled in Bengal, and the edit page guy said, look, you wrote one here, would you write? And I did a piece, and I wrote one line there: the only radical thing happening with society in Bengal. I wrote something about how the BJP is getting different caste groups, and I said that appears to be the only radical thing happening in the otherwise static society of Bengal. That line, it went through. There was fine, no problem with the paper. But there was arguments which other people had with me following that one line. So this book, you are speaking to somebody who was looking for this material as a reporter, as a journalist, as a commentator. This book is so rich. For me, the takeaway from this book is it is so rich with the details of the of the mobilization among Dalits, Adivasis, about identifying various caste heroes, to put it all together. That, I think, is a real service to this book, because it gives us insights into, we all know this has been happening. I've written about it. Non-dominant social groups is the phrase that I used in my 2017 book, that the BJP is going to, the social thing is non-dominant OBCs, non-dominant scheduled caste groups. But I have not seen this detail. I have not done it myself. The detailing of how it is being done, the various community icons, the gods which are being, and the mobilization, the work that goes into this kind of preparation. So I think it's very, very important. I entirely disagree with a section of the book, but maybe we won't talk about that right now. Where, or maybe later. If we are going to, Rahul, do we have another round or do we just have one go? What does it look like? Your audio is there. You'll have to open up.
If we are going to make our comments a bit like tight and sharp, then we will have a second.
Okay, so I may as well just have it out there because it's also the point that I find for such a fine book, and I heard Badri speak just now. He's obviously grappling with approaches and nuances and all. There is a part here which completely makes no sense to me. I'll be very honest. On page 104, after these multiple ground interviews with RSS Pracharaks, Badri concludes that the RSS is not interested in escalating small clashes between people of the two communities. Its cadres did not flare up the tension to transform those into larger conflicts. At the same time, the RSS uses the impact of the clash to strengthen Hindutva ideology. Whatever, I mean, I know there are other bits also because I have done a speed reading of the book today. I have 2 copies now. The publisher's arrived. I purchased one in the morning. So I've done it. It's a very, very easy, lovely read. I find this because fundamentally, whether they're doing it with caste groups, whether they're going to Dalit communities, whether they're going to STs communities, whether they have unearthed the gods of the Matuas in Bengal, where I just was, of the Namashudras, whether the Prime Minister is going to Bangladesh to invoke that kind of community pride in these people. They are fundamentally the whole construct, the whole motivational ideology is to show Muslims their place. That is the one thing that unites electoral efforts all over, time and again with the Bharatiya Janata Party. So at this point of the book, the BJP starts, the RSS starts sounding as if they're doing good social work. So that, Badri, I have an issue with that. They are doing, I think, like I said, there is some radical stuff they're doing within the fold of what they consider to be Hindu society, right? And the motivation for that, however, does not seem to be some, in my view, the motivation is not some great large integration of Hinduism, because let us never forget, in the state of Maharashtra, which is the home of Ambedkar, Phule, all of that, where Bhima Koregaon is located, when they got a chance, they came up with a Brahmin as a chief minister. In the state of Uttar Pradesh, with all this subaltern caste assertion, they came up with a Thakur as a chief minister. So let's not forget these big, big things. Are these just techniques? These are techniques towards a certain end, because the RSS leadership is controlled by the RSS, which is a Brahminical, Maharashtrian Brahminical. So let me say all the things. Let me put so I'm challenging you with these. In the end, for all these subaltern assertions, they have put a Brahmin in Maharashtra, which has never happened except in the case of Manohar Joshi. Maharashtra usually had Marathas or Dalits as chief ministers, right? There was one gentleman called Manohar Joshi, and they were back with a Brahmin. In Uttar Pradesh did not have, but they were back with a Thakur. So you have this ironical situation of Dalit, and you have had a lot of Dalit atrocities against Dalits also. So these are important details, I think. And I simply am credulous at this point that they want to engage with Muslims beyond positing them as the enemy. I don't think so that is the case. But Badri, I love the book. So I know there's too much time going on the critique, what I think, but these are good points to thrash out. I really think it's an important book, because nobody that I have read, people come at it from the top of leadership. They come at books on the BJP, at leadership, governments, personalities, we're all guilty of that. And you have gone to the ground and shown us how it's done. So this book will be a reference material for me always. And I would thank you very much. What was the other question, Rahul? If you have more time, I can hold forth.
No, basically, yeah. Other question in brief, which is basically to do with, the new social contract being offered
Yeah.
to
Now,
various
so let
communities.
me dwell a bit on Bengal. So let me
And this
just,
is a,
yeah.
ma'am, please go ahead with the thrashing. I think, like, it's a academic discussion, right? And Badriji will have a chance to
We
respond.
will have. So, Badriji, I have an issue with that,
Yeah.
But so this is important, and I think it's because you have a particular voice that you are able to enlighten us about these details. These details, as a journalist who also believes ultimately I used to, when I was in charge of bureaus and all that, I say the details are always important. So this is so rich in those kind of details. Some of your conclusions I disagree with, as I've made more than abundantly clear. Let me just quickly take us to the state of West Bengal, where all the templates that Badri has written in his book are at work over there. Not one of them. The Muslim one is working the way I'm describing it. With all the social media entirely. There is such huge mobilization specific to each locality. There is a social media cell of the BJP in every seat with specific to Malda, specific to Chobis Pargana. Chobis Pargana not needed to communalize. Nandigram needed to communalize. Different details. In some cases because there is splits in Muslim vote. But the bit that is why this book is so important. Now we are seeing people's idea of themselves, who they are, being transformed by this campaign and the work that is the preparation that the Bharatiya Janata Party has been doing since, in my view, it is because the Trinamool Congress literally broke the back of the opposition in the 2018 Panchayat polls. They created a vacuum, and there that 1/3 of the seats were not contested in that state by any opposition. So in that vacuum came the Bharatiya Janata Party with all the money, with all the cadre, with all of this. And also, I have not found any reference, Badri, of the kind of resources that go into this kind of engagement. It is unprecedented. This is not a free picnic. That is not some social service. This is a very expensive undertaking, as people of Bengal have undertaken. There is great profit now in being a Hindu, whether you are a Matua, great profit, meaning you sense that you would prosper if you rediscover a certain identity. And it is indeed true in the narratives of oppression, particularly in Bengal, where the left leadership was in complete denial of even the existence of caste. So there was no social mobility over there for years and years, unlike what happened in the state of Kerala, where there was some awareness. And this is not the time and the place. I did some interviews with both Sita Ram and with Prakash once, which was big bloomers for them, because Sita said that he grew up without knowing what was caste. I mean, here's the leader of the left. He grew up, and then one day he was traveling in a train compartment, and then later he realized that the guy he was traveling with was a Dalit, but actually he never knew there was caste. There was only class. So it caused a lot of that interview caused a lot of embarrassment. And Prakash Karath incidentally said to me that the reason why the upper caste, the left is full of upper caste, is because other people cannot afford it cannot live on the 3,500 rupees stipend that they give to party workers. Only the Brahmins can. These were the sort of explanations they were given. They were hilarious and they were unacceptable at that time. So, which is why you're seeing, except for Kerala, where they had real social mobility. I'm sure Vargi knows much more about it than I do, because I know Bengal a little bit. So in that context, the BJP has been able to move in, and there was no Mandal, there was no Dravidian politics. There was nothing in Bengal. I gather that during the time when Mandal was transforming equations in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, in Bengal, the number of upper caste MLAs was going up. So that is actually what is exploding right now. And the Bharatiya Janata Party, whatever the aims are to unite society or to keep them within the fold, whatever the aims are, that is the basis on which everything is happening. That's ingredient number one, is caste assertions and giving everybody a jhanda and saying you are part of us, and that us is Jai Shri Ram. And Jai Shri Ram there is not only about Hinduism and majoritarianism. It's also like a little bit of Inqilab Zindabad. It's protest. We are also there and we can also defeat you. It's a little bit of element of that. It's an alternative slogan also, because I don't think people have completely processed what they are engaged in right now. There's a touch of that. There is also a lot of majoritarian sentiment depending on where you are, but it's not exactly become UP and UP right now. For instance, in Chobis Pargana, which is southern Bengal, you will find Muslims who are quite not even scared of the BJP. They have no idea what it's like to live with the BJP. But you travel up to Malda and there is a complete polarization against Muslims by Hindus. But the Muslims are divided between Congress and Trinamool. So it's a fascinating interplay that's going on. But there is no question that I can hear, Badri, in Bengal. One of the BJP guys told me that when the party landed up there, in Bengal, Muslims are such a large number. So I'm just giving you an anecdote here. There's such a large number that many of them, and they like to be with whoever's coming into power, many of them were wanting to join the BJP. But the BJP had to turn them away. They don't really want them. There'll be a few, because Muslims are everywhere in Bengal, they need some for working, for the logistics, they are handy, banners lagana hai, tempos karna hai, they need them for that. They don't want to include them. This was an opportunity to include them. Bengal was. They were ready, but they didn't want them. They had to turn away the Muslim application, number one. So that does not apply. I don't think that contract, the social contract that all of you speak about, extends to Muslims at all. Because if it did, then who will be the enemy for this grand? I mean, the basic thing is we can go either way. You come back to the enemy. That is what is required for its society, which is divided on the basis of caste. You need to have one enemy. That I'm completely convinced of. Number two, I will just end this conversation with an anecdote from the state of Uttar Pradesh, where my family has a village, though I'm a Delhi person, not far from Allahabad, Badri, where you are sitting. It is on the Lucknow Allahabad road. You divert into Uchahar district and you are there in the family village. But my usual hunting ground for election coverage in Western UP is I take a particular route. I go to Muzaffarnagar, Shamli, from that road which is now blocked. And then I head up Muradabad, Rampur. It's been a route which I've repeated a few times, and I have a few set people that I meet in a few times. In 2019, I had first done the first round of voting, which is the Muzaffarnagar area, where the Jats was, where the Ajit Singh's party and Jayant Chaudhary and Ajit Singh were in play, and they were contesting from the two seats. And it seemed that they could win Muzaffarnagar. It looked like a good contest. And then I was in phase 3 seat sitting in Muradabad, which has a little bit Muslim population, little more. In the Muradabad BJP office, I was talking about Muzaffarnagar. 2019 elections, this is. Muzaffarnagar, if you remember, had the big riot, not the small riot, which also impacted the 2014 narrative. But by 2019, the communal divisions were somewhat glossed over. And I was talking to one gentleman, a local MLA of the BJP in the party office, when one man overheard me talking about Muzaffarnagar, and he came and sat there and he said, "Aapko Muzaffarnagar ki baat karni hai, main batata hoon." He was Chaudhary Birendra Singh. He was from the RSS and the BJP. He was a full-time worker, and he took my number and he told me that the BJP would win that seat by 5,000 votes, Ajit Singh's seat. And he gave me the reasons why. And I said, but everyone is saying Ajit Singh will win that seat of Muzaffarnagar. He gave me block by block and he said, I will phone you when the results come out. He was an RSS organizer. I was sitting in a TV studio when the results came out and my phone rang and this man called me up and he had turned out to be right. So I'm just giving you this anecdote. And he was a minister in the state government. I don't think he is there anymore, but he was a long-time RSS worker. He had it down to which urban sectors they will lose, which one they will win. So because Badri does expand in one part of the book on the role the RSS plays in the BJP's march, which is why I end with this. This was a memory where this man, against everything, was certain. He took my number just to make that call, and he was right, absolutely down. It was a narrow margin, he had that narrow margin right. He had done his groundwork down to polling booths. So the RSS is a very, very important organization for us to understand. And this book is going to be very useful to anyone who wants to move on and and just understand what's happening on the ground. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sabhaji. Professor Ahuja, you've been listening very quietly for now 50 minutes. So, of course, you may have many things to say about Badriji's book, but I want you to also reflect on one question. What role do you see of Dalit agency, especially like in your own work, as Badriji pointed out, both the Bahujan movement as well as RSS BJP penetration among Dalits sort of begins at the same time in like mid 80s and gains momentum in 90s. In the first phase, North India, the Bahujan movement succeeds, at least succeeds electorally, and then they fall. And now basically what we are seeing is that the RSS BJP is reaping electoral benefit of the cultural project, which is now 25 years old. What is the difference of like in both these movements of Dalit agency and how they have been negotiated with these two movements?
Firstly, Rahul, let me just thank you for inviting me to this fantastic discussion. This is just even, this far, so it has been such a rich discussion. And to talk about Professor Narayan's book, I was telling him before we began today, I have never met him, but I have known his work for a very long time. And in fact, his work was very, very much instrumental in shaping my own thinking when I was doing research through UP and Bihar. So it's a real privilege to be discussing this book. I'm also really honored to be in the company of two senior journalists whose work I have admired for a very long time. So yeah, thank you so much. Let me do this. Let me just, so let's say a couple of things. One, my comments, I've sort of assigned myself the mandate of representing the political scientist, side of the story. And so in some ways, a lot of what I'm going to say will synthesize some of the things that have already been said. And in the process, Rahul, I hope I'm able to also respond to those very specific and very interesting questions that you've posed, for me. So let me begin by sort of saying what I thought was just really eye-catching for me and something that reinforced things that I've seen on the ground and has been so nicely brought out. One aspect when we look at Indian politics, and if you look at a study of Indian politics in the last 2 decades, there's been a lot of focus on looking at kind of messaging parties do, candidates, electoral strategies. And what Badriji's book tells us is that, look, ultimately mobilization matters and mass mobilization matters. And sort of reclaiming this and reinforcing this idea, which is in some ways so fundamental and so obvious, and yet has come to be neglected by not just by political science, but also, interestingly, by politicians themselves. To have a good ground game in between elections, not just 2 or 3 weeks before elections, really matters. And the book shows that. Knocking on doors, on developing a particular narrative, knowing how people are thinking, shaping their thinking, taking a long-term view, and doing this day in and day out. These are consequential things. And what is also really interesting, that there is a new, and correctly so, and some of the comments have focused on that, which is this focus on social media, and how much social media matters to mobilization today. Indeed, it does. But go back to what Zainab Tufekci tells us, that social media is helpful. It will project your message. But if you're thinking the social media is going to be able to cover for a lack of a ground game, of actually having an organization on the ground, that is not going to happen. The reason social media goes so much further for the BJP is because they actually have a ground game in place, and the RSS helps with that in a long way, because that's what informs the messages. That's what makes that messaging so much more effective. That's one point. The second point, which also I think comes through, and folks have pointed out, and it's so evident in how, if you go back to the UP elections, if you go back to what has happened in Tamil Nadu, what's happening in Bengal, is this whole idea that sort of dichotomy in the study of Indian politics between Mandir and Mandal. This was always a slightly tricky dichotomy to sell, and today this has completely broken down. They both go together. The BJP will use caste and religion at the same time. They will mobilize, for example, Dalits in the name of Ram and as well as in the name of Ambedkar. And we see that. We've seen that how selecting a particular jatis for mobilization in UP, so-called non-dominant jatis, particular jatis in Bengal, in Tamil Nadu. So there is a very, very strong caste mobilization component to BJP's project, and the RSS is very much a part of that. And this, of course, creates interesting dilemmas, and I'm going to sort of come to that. The third aspect, and again, I'm speaking a little bit about political science and where it's gone. Some of the best work and most interesting work that's come out in the last 2 decades or so has been around the connection between elections and essentially public goods and public services, roads, electricity, and other sort of public service programs. And whether parties are able to do this or not, and to what extent, and what's the quid pro quo there between the parties and the voters. And I think what is really nice is, and this is something that I myself sort of see in my own work, is that what Badriji is reminding us, that look, when it comes to where voters see political parties, there is a very substantial cultural, symbolic project involved. This has to do with the emotional connection political parties make with the voters. And that is why temples get built. That is why statues are installed. You're sort of looking at from the outside, you may sort of scratch your head and say, oh, this is such wasteful expenditure. How is it changing people's lives? And why are parties doing this? They're doing this for a reason. There is a clear rationale to it. And it's about pride. It's about recognition. And there's also, and if I'm just, please indulge me here a little bit, a very clear political economy reason for it. And let me sort of lay that out for you. When you build a road and it gets washed away in the next monsoon, it has to be rebuilt. When you lay out, put down electricity poles and even put on the wires, and there's no electricity coming through it, then the voters are going to start wondering what's really going on. And these things happen. Point is, you can provide these public services. To sustain them over a long period of time requires a lot of money. Politicians don't have that kind of a tenure. Candidates get recycled swiftly. They jump parties. A lot of these things are going on. But the political economy of a statue, of a temple, is very different. These are too holy to fail. Once you have, you can build a public school, and it may not work out. The road will get washed away. But once you put a statue in there, and it has people's devotion and pride attached to it, they will maintain it. They will make sure that it remains there and nobody gets to remove it. So in some ways, these projects will sustain themselves with the participation of the community in ways that schools, electricity, and roads will not. So there's a reason for why parties do this. There's a reason for why the RSS uses these. And these are actually extremely astute and smart programs if you sort of think about it from the perspective of mobilization and building long-term loyalty with a group. Finally, what I also really enjoyed is this warning, this cautionary note that Badriji has in his book. which is that, look, think very carefully about how you read the RSS. Not only there are aspects of the RSS that are not visible to us, we have our own stereotypes about what the RSS is, what it does, and and those stereotypes in many cases have been frozen in time. Whereas the RSS has evolved, it continues to evolve. It's a creature which is adapted really well to the various constraints in its path. And it's managed to survive and grow. And so in some ways, there is a reason for us to continuously look at it, to understand where its thinking, where its ideas are going. Whether it's use of technology, whether it's perspective on where the world is, it has an evolving worldview. I'll give you one simple example. For example, lots of commentary on RSS focuses on how the early leaders of RSS were inspired by the Nazis and Hitler, and that sort of frame is always been there. But talk to a lot of people today, the younger members, and you'll find that that's not really the case. A lot of them, for one reason or another, are very impressed with China. They see China as a threat, but they also see China as a long-standing civilization, and they see the Chinese Communist Party as a party which has succeeded in this project of maintaining control, of remaining popular, of becoming a symbol of Chinese nationalism. So there is a great deal of curiosity about China in today's, among the younger members. And so it's really interesting to sort of see that. And again, if you just buy into the sort of standard tropes about a party, about the organization, I think we'll sort of miss that. Let me quickly now switch to some questions, and it's also sort of allow me to get to what Rahul you asked, which is this, that look, the RSS and the BJP has done a lot of groundwork. It has a strong ground game, no two ways about it. But at the end of the day, politics today is about aspirations. Even in a moment of COVID, even in such a traumatic moment in terms of where our public health issues are, people are still, when they come out of it, are still looking at moving up, of making their lives better. And and that aspiration is not particular to one community. And given that, when politics is attentive to some of these things, yes, you can talk about Hindu grievance, but you are also talking about people's dreams. You're also selling them a dream of upward mobility. And if that is indeed the case, then how do you reconcile in the dreams of different communities? Because as Vargi's pointed out, if you're looking towards a goal of social harmony, then in a hierarchical society, the aspiration among certain groups is going to be for social equality, for social justice, and those projects are not good for social harmony. They cause social turbulence. And so how do you reconcile that? You can build a big tent. Where do you seat the people in that tent? That is the big question, right? Because you cannot play the old Congress politics of, sure, there is hierarchy, we will have different groups in the party, and every group will know its place. That's no longer the case, because whether it's the South, where the change had occurred a long time ago, in the West again, but even now in the North, we are talking about post-Mandal politics, we're talking about post-Bahujan politics. Aspirations have changed. People are no longer willing to be assigned a subordinate position. They may be subaltern, but they don't want to be subordinate to anyone. So how do you reconcile these aspirations in today's times? And attached to that question is this other idea. Sure, you are saying that today the RSS is the largest NGO. You may also say that it is crowding out all other ideas. It probably is the largest game in town. But what about other ideas which are also brewing, which have very strong foundation, whether it's the Ambedkari movement in Maharashtra, whether it's the kind of cultural project the BJP created, which you so nicely document. Sure, you can put Ambedkar in the same frame as Ram, but there are people who have read Ambedkar. They are not going to be easily persuaded always by the BJP's adaptation of Ambedkar, and there is a tension between that. So how do you reconcile these ideas, because these ideas also make a claim on the loyalty of marginalized groups, on the loyalty of Dalits, because there is a promise of emancipation. I go back to my own field research and long-term engagement in UP, for example. So I've seen some of the things that you describe about, I'm thinking about Bundelkhand and the region around Chitrakoot, where there was this effort of bringing in smaller Dalit jatis over a long period of time, and it was done very gradually, to bring these people in. But since then, times have changed, and now, because of Ambedkar statues, because there's a larger conversation, there's a larger exposure to ideas. Similarly, there are with other communities, there are other interests. The farmers' movement, for example, today is challenging the sort of discourse that the RSS and the BJP has on the ground. Now, so how do you deal with this? And especially in the name of for Dalits, the earlier story was when the BJP was trying to mobilize, and I'm thinking in the early 2000s, and when where the BSP was very strong. It still is actually. We don't give it enough credit, but a lot of what I heard was कि हम तो लड़कों को लाते हैं, वो they join the shakhas also, पर फिर वो भाग जाते हैं. And the challenge that they were facing at that time, they were not able to hold on to the people they had recruited, and the real the difficulty there was that a lot of these boys expected a different kind of treatment. Now, have those aspirations have not gone away. Sure, they may be stronger for certain Dalit jatis than others, but they are very much there. So, how do you reconcile these things? Because unless you do that, Dalits will always remain ideological suspects. They'll always and this when you talk to people in the RSS, you talk to people in the BJP, there is this fear of Dalits seceding away from the BJP. So it's an interesting sort of thing. And again, so that sort of brings us to the next question, which is how do we know that all this work that's being done, and the fact that the vote share of the BJP has gone from 10 to 25 to 34% in the last election. How do we know that this is not an opportunistic instrumentalist shift, and is an ideological shift, as Badriji you're suggesting, because it's happened so rapidly. A lot of what the RSS has been up to has been going on for such a long time, and if so, then why did this jump happen so suddenly and so swiftly? I can see if you give me the argument that no, these people were always closet Hindutva supporters. I can buy that argument for the middle classes. But to buy that for Dalits is a little bit trickier. One last comment that I have is that you're right that we need to focus on how the BSP, how the RSS has evolved and what those trends are. This is a movement, and the BJP is a party that has done some serious thinking on including marginalized castes. And let's be upfront about it. They've thought a great deal about it. Then the story that you have in your own book, which Walter Anderson tells about Tarun Vijay, for example, going and trying and getting Dalits entry into a temple in Uttarakhand and getting beaten up in the process. So there are those kind of stories. But at the same time, there is a certain conservative element, a strong conservative element in the organization. And because it is looking for social harmony, it really doesn't know how to wrap its head around social justice. But as the component of Dalits, of OBCs in the party, as this goes up, as their membership goes up, the question to then ask is that here is a project which wanted to change India, but is their social composition, changing social composition, likely to change the RSS and the BJP? Is this going to evolve into a party which is very different from what we see today? Or is it just going to be a party which will somehow try its very best to mold all these new entrants into its notion of social harmony and continue to kick that troublesome question of social justice down the road? So I'll stop there, and I'm sure there'll be questions, so we'll take this up there. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Amit. Professor Badri Narayan, I'll just add two questions from the Q&A box, and because they are related to some of the things Amit was saying in the last. One is a question by Abhinav Prakash, which is sort of like Amit was asking about, changing social base and leadership. Abhinav is asking, there is a section among RSS BJP who has social orthodoxy, and how will that sort of like, that leadership will sort of integrate this new social engineering project of bringing the subaltern caste within the fold. The second question is by Tanushri Goyal, and she is basically asking, what role do you think this cultural, RSS and BJP, at least in portrayal, is also seen as a very patriarchal organization? So what role these cultural mobilizations have played in sort of like bringing female activists within the BJP and RSS fold? So you have 8 to 10 minutes to respond. Whichever questions you don't like, feel free to lead them.
Thank you for wonderful comments and analysis and questions posed by all of you, all the panelists. And first of all, I would like to submit that maybe I cannot satisfy all of you because and we need to keep our disagreement, because that is our strength. Because it's not my purpose to try to persuade you on the argument which I am giving. But I would like to clarify a few things. And first of all, I would like to say that I have already told in the book that these are very contentious zone for RSS, and these relations are very complex. When I'm talking about Dalit and marginal community, I said it's not very easy. It's a very difficult terrain, and RSS is working on that terrain. And I have also said that the matured pracharak, those who are very mature, they are able to handle this contradiction. And many of them, those who are not very mature, they fail in doing that. That's why sometimes you must have heard that Adi tribal, hum to Adivasi hai, hum Hindu kyun keh rahe ho, no? Various kinds of things emerge because the pracharak working on that area maybe not very matured in terms of communicating his message, doing the mobilizational programs. So this kind of contradictions may emerge. So third thing which I already said, that some of things are started at the level of idea, not at They have not yet translated at the level of grassroots and the groundwork. And this whole motion of including Muslim, Sabha is contested that they don't need Muslim. But I think if you think in terms of mobilizational understanding, they need Muslim. Without that, they can't create the Akhand Bharat, which is they want to do, and that is their bigger agenda. Their agenda is not to provide support to BJP and get victory of the BJP. Their agenda is much larger, and they are working for that agenda. And social mobilization is one process in that. And I'm not going to tell that they are very adhyatmic people. They are very, very good in sabda, karuna. They are not full of all. I'm not saying. I'm just seeing in terms of mobilizational politics, mobilizational methods, and mobilizational ways. If you see from that argument, also they need the communities which are opposites of them, and they are working to create, mobilize, whatever you can say. That word can say whatever. Now, the question raised by Vargi is very pertinent about this social justice and samajik samrasta. Actually, there is a contest of two languages, different kind of language in Indian politics or Indian mobilization politics. One is this kind of nyay. So the notion came through modernity and percolated down through our constitution also. That's one kind of language. There is another kind of language which RSS is mastered in doing that, in speaking that, the language of tradition, which I am trying to tell again and again. Samrasta, the whole notion of samrasta. If you see the echo of the samrasta, that's entirely different thing than the samajik nyaya. What would be after samajik nyaya? After samajik nyaya, you will reach to the samrasta. So the ideal is bigger. The language which they are opting from, which have the traditional echo, traditional Hindu, traditional echo you can say. So they are very particular in using the terms, but ultimately term goes to the public, and public appreciate those terms. Like if you go and talk about samajik nyaya in villages, people don't know Jantantra, democracy. No one knows. I know about the Pradesh in Bihar. If you go and talk about Jantantra, I think people know Ijat, people know Barabari. People, they have their own ways to interpret the politics and understand. So RSS has evolved another small g of the politics, and that we need to analyze in our academics of, and that we don't do because our methods of seeing them is from another angle. Second thing, you are very right that what would be the ideas and ideology which are contesting to them and those who are out of their universe. And I have also said these are the difficult to terrain for, like Ambedkarites, educated Ambedkarites. They are very difficult terrain for. Maoists, they are very difficult terrain for. But Dalit is not only this microscopic, smaller minority who are well trained in the Ambedkarite schools. 80-90% Dalits, those who are in villages, and they are in their reach. They are of their target. And there I have discussed how they are providing the sense of religious equality. You always talk about socio-economic equality. In the entire notion of social samajik nyaya, we talk about socio-economic equality. But we don't talk about the religious equality. Religious, Ambedkar talked. Temple entry was there. But now there is another urge among community, and that I have discussed in the book. They want their own temple of the local deities. Because most of them came from the tribal areas. They came with their deities, and they put the deities under the people tree, and they want the temple of that. There is a village, Jayapura near Banaras, which the Prime Minister has adopted that village. And there is a Sabri temple established by the BJP people in the Mushahar Basti. And if you go and talk to the Musahars, they say 50 कोस में इधर कोई मंदिर नहीं था हमारे देवता का. Sabri का पहला मंदिर हमको मिला. First temple in the entire history of the community. So they feel very empowered. This also because for them, temple is not only temple; it's also public space. Share in the public space, where they sit, they cry, they do शादी विवाह का पंचायत करते हैं. No, they want space, and the temple RSS respond to this kind of desires also.
Badri ji, मैं थोड़ी क्षमा चाहता हूँ. Just one small point there. आपकी बात, I completely agree with you. But just here's one thing. You sort of talk about the story that, when you go to Dalit households, you will see images of Ram, Shiva, you will see Vaishno Devi, you will see Ambedkar on the same wall. You are absolutely right about that. But here is the thing, Dalits will show up at the temples of Ram and Shiva, but others don't show up at the temples of Ravidas. And my point is, don't questions of Barabari show up? Don't those kind of questions of Barabari get asked at that time?
No. I'm saying that Barabari, they don't ask religious Barabari. They want their share in the public space, and share through religious temple space and temple space of their icons. Those icons are not equal to the Ram and Shiva. And they don't, but Ram and Shiva, when they see that there is a temple of Ram and Shiva in the forward basti of another village, they aspire that kind of temple. They have the aspirations, but they don't have capacity to build the temple. So RSS organizations help them to build their smaller temple in their own villages. They have to survey of the community, where what they want, what is their local deities, and what to respond to. Second is the social project, Seva Karya, which they say in their line. That's very important because, when I was working among Dalits in 2002 and all, and I saw this RSS penetration among them, I also observed that most of their penetration was with the most marginal communities. In Uttar Pradesh, we have more than 65 Dalit community, and among them, more than 50 are invisible. No one knows about them. So they focus mostly in those community from that time. You got the result in 2014. Most of the non-Jat or non-dominant mobilization came, but they started working on those communities and through Seva Karya. This dignity, sense of dignity, and giving them capacity to aspire. Because most of the communities have no capacity to aspire of a better life. So how it will come? Thoda safai, thodi school, thodi shiksha, thodi cheezein. They are not a state, but they involve with social stakeholders. Like it's very interesting. I will narrate one instance. In Sonbhadra region of they are working on a notion of dharm village among tribals. What is this dharm village? Dharm village के नाम पे हम लोग घबरा जाएंगे तो dharm village कोई लड़ाई झगड़ा शुरू होगा. No. What is this dharm village? Dharm village is they make 20 jajman, and each jajman will give 5 lakh or 10 lakh rupees, and so they call dharm pita. And this dharm pita of the village, they donate for the development of the village, and that money become more than 2 crore or 3 crore. They use for opening a school. They use for reviving the traditional water resources there. Supporting, giving tirandaji ke liye til kharid ke dena tribal bachchon ko. So this is one way. CSR ka bhi paisa aata hai. I'm not negating that the state support does not matter for them, but there. So these mediums slowly be become down among bigger section of marginal communities. और यही नहीं होता. फिर वहाँ होगा तो there will be school. वहाँ पर कीर्तन भी होगा, वहाँ पे भजन भी होगा, जय श्री राम भी होगा, हनुमान भी होंगे, there is a tribal god के का गुणगान भी होगा. Everything will happen. So it's entire universe, creative universe. So it's not a only political project or it's very utilitarian project. It's a bigger project. It's a project of making their own public. You can say Hindutva public. कुछ भी कह लें आप, but their own public. But I also am fully agree, but these are very contesting zone. And any time, because it's एक तरह से ये शेर पर सवारी करना है, कभी भी वो लट के आपको काट सकता है, because But the impact you can see, if you see the profile of the Pracharaks of Sun, there is no study of the caste service Pracharak, because mostly don't say about their caste. But if you will ask to the local people, local RSS cadres, they will tell you, ये पासी है, ये धरिकार हैं, ये शाद हैं. So many Dalit and marginal communities are emerging as their Pracharaks in some profile. So the Sabha was saying, no, the Brahminical, no. Now this notion is changing in terms of practice. I don't know kitna samay lagega to change their ideology or ideas. Because I always say that already said that practice impact the ideas also, ideology also. And RSS, you should understand RSS in this way. This may be one of them. There is another way we used to study. ऊपर से ideas आते हैं और RSS ये लोग implement करते हैं. But that does not work. मुझे लगता है that's not a good way to understand RSS. RSS, if you want to understand, you see RSS in the practice. और तो ये हुआ language की बात, and then Shaba rightly this whole notion of a small class is very interesting. The entire notion of communal rights is changing in India. Only bigger communal rights of Delhi wala right, Muzaffarnagar, लेकिन now my question is, what I observe, why do we need communal rights? In our analysis, for mobilization, for polarization, vote के लिए क्यों communal right की जरूरत? If smaller classes can give more benefits than any bigger rights, why anyone can force or manipulate or make or communal rights? So small classes picked up by the media, social media, by television channels, or it is being propagated every day. You can see that मुजफ्फरनगर वो फलाने बहराइच में छोटी सी लड़ाई हो गई हिंदू और मुस्लिम लड़के में, and that or वो story is coming again and again and traveling here and there, and that is creating a bigger impact than the local impact of the communal rights which used to take place in 70s or 80s. तो उसका impact से ज़्यादा impact is virtually multiplied impact of these smaller classes are taking place in our society. So, if I agree with if I take your argument, your Sabha argument, or argument like liberals that RSS used to involve in all these things, or RSS नहीं तो RSS से जुड़ी हुई शक्तियाँ forces those who are involved with them, तब भी smaller classes will be much beneficial than the communal rights. So the whole notion of communal right may be rethought, we need to rethink that, but I'm not going to stretch it much. मेरे पास भी I don't have much analysis and I have not yet studied a lot the entire phenomena. Just I observe in few cases. But you can see after 2009 when BJP came in power in Uttar Pradesh, बहुत ही मतलब smaller ये classes भी कम हो गई, and there is the importance of just using Kabristan and Smasan. If you use Kabristan and Smasan, it is more powerful than any communal rights, any small class also. Because the what I said, that the Hindutva common sense has been forged and formed among, and that is more powerful.
Can I just interrupt here, Badriji, if you don't mind? How do you think lynching and stopping people's livelihood or ये सब, you don't need to do? There are two. I will just interrupt you to say I disagree again. Gujarat, 2002, Muzaffarnagar were big riots. They had an impact on politics. They changed Indian politics. Smaller riots take place in a later situation when you want to keep the temperatures boiling. And there are small riots in Bengal also. So I would disagree with this thesis because you have, it appears that you are saying there is peace. They have put the names of Muslim protesters on board. It's a very, there is no scope for any Muslim to do anything, to do any protest, to do anything. So what you are projecting as a sort of peaceful Uttar Pradesh, no riots, there is continued violence of another nature. So a riot is not needed. That's all. So I just wanted to interrupt.
Yeah, यहाँ पर I am agree with you that there is another forms of violence and lynching. I am not also going to defend, or no one will.
No.
But if you study the making of lynching, take 1 or 5 or 10 cases and do deeper study, then you can find answer of these questions. because I'm not going to tell much about that. Otherwise, people will think that I'm defending RSS or whatever, and that is not my purpose also, because scholars should be always neutral. But sometimes it happens when you defend your case, you become more passionate and try to defend the organization to go much beyond of your limits. Anyway, Amit, wonderful remark on the book and its suggestions, and I have already replied that these are the contentious zone and difficult zone for the RSS, and amid right discourse is not very easy for them to. But you know, as political scientists, that discourse always can be submerged in the memory. Memory is larger thing than the discourse. When you create a memory, and when they are going to create a memory of Ambedkar as a Mahapurush, as a Samajik Sudharak, as a God, as a deity, there is a scope, and they believe in that will help them to include or these opposites and to synthesize this with this opposite. But giving the sheer, as Shaba raised very tough questions.
No,
This Yogi Adityanath and giving the sheer is a big question. But maybe in future you can see, because any organization, first of all, you can also see that the entire profile of the Pracharak are changing, as I said. If you study the Pracharak castes who are working in Uttar, earlier they were bringing Pracharaks from Maharashtra to work in the Uttar Pradesh. They had no Pracharaks since 50s. No? After 50, 60, they have started evolving local Pracharak. Now they have Dalit Pracharaks and all. Slowly these Pracharaks goes to the BJP. They emerge as leader, and they can take share of in the power. So you should be ready to see in the future that Sangh and RSS Hindutva politics are also going to prepare their own leaders from this community. Like as I said, this is a smaller community. They had no leaders. One very interesting experience I would like to share. We had organized a program in our institute in which we invited more than community leader. They had no leaders, but communities क्या कहेंगे बोलने वाला नो community में कुछ बोलने वाले लोगों को we had invited here, and we invited BSP Mayawati that time. We invited Akhilesh Yadav. We invited Rahul Gandhi. Only Rahul Gandhi came in that meeting. And Rahul Gandhi said that, yes, we would like to do. He interacted with the community very well, as he does. But what happened? Nothing happened. And this is a case of 2007 or 10. And RSS, after a few days of this program, there is a statement came in the local newspaper that RSS will work for this community. And RSS started working on this in this community in this area in Shankargarh, in Allahabad and the locals of Allahabad, and they cultivated their Pracharaks also, leaders also from those communities. So BSP Mayawati never thinks about this community. She is very happy with 4-5 Dalit castes. No, she does not want to extend her politics to this community because वो बहुत difficult terrain है काम करने. समाजवादी पार्टी का कोई कंसर्न ही नहीं. तो RSS is doing there for what? What is the gain they are seeing in that? उनको तो MP MLA भी नहीं बनना है, ministry भी नहीं बनना है. They have a bigger project, bigger agenda of making a Hindutva public, which I am saying, and Hindutva public may including all these communities, those who are Hindu community because they have the Hindu cultural base. And Sabha is very right. It's very difficult. It's not difficult for them. Like Vargi, that it is easy. No, within working in within is easy, but not so easy. It's also very difficult because sometimes I used to tell कि जो दलित होते हैं ना, दलितों को अपने में लेना is कई दांतों को अपने में लेना है, no, that will वो आपको फाड़ भी सकता है ना sometimes. तो वो बहुत difficult काम है which they are doing. But Muslims is still a big churning in the RSS, how to work with them, how to respond to them, how to. But it does not. I'm here. Only one thing where I am not agree. They don't have any concern about this. They have proved your vote has no meaning. No, broader Hindutva, Hindu votes together can be a factor for winnability of any political party. We don't need Muslim votes. They have proved. अब क्या करना है? अब तो you have already proved. So slowly they will have to. This is my assumption. I don't know because I'm not the person who has any connection with the RSS. मैं बाहर से RSS को देखता हूँ. मेरा कोई internal. I don't have any communication. So I don't. But I think because social project कहाँ जाएगा? Where to go? Either it will fix here, or it has to go. If it has to grow, it has to go to these terrains where, because we understand their nature. अगर आप देखें the history of 30 years of the RSS expansion, you can find the approach and the pattern in that, going to the difficult terrains, going to the terrains where they are opposite terrains of the opposites, and trying to improve. ये मन से है कि सिर्फ utilitarian है कि सिर्फ I'm not going to involve in this kind of argument, because as a scholar, my only way purpose to understand the methods, creativity, and how they are working. But Amit, question is, a better India banana. Is there any promise of making better India, equal India? I think if you talk to the Mohan Bhagwat or any RSS Pracharek, he will say yes. वो तो बहुत simple answer है for them. But if you see in the process, I tell you the case of this most marginal community. If you go in Sonbhadra and see the impact of their work, if you go among Sapiras, among Tatwas and Rangrej, you can see the impact of their work. So it may have the another purpose. I'm not going to engage myself in that. But the impact at the social level, impact at the level of their development, I'm not using, because development is always goes towards a state. But the social empowerment, social mobility, at least you can see in the marginal communities where they are working. And that much I assure, and I people in the field sometimes want to go and see their work in those areas. Tripura, they voted for BJP. No, everyone was surprised why they voted for tribals came, because of that they won. Why tribal comes? How tribal comes? We didn't follow. From Dang to Tripura. Why they are voting to them? Maoist ko chhod dijiye to. Maoist are Gandhian and Maoist. Gandhian are Gandhian those who are working among tribals. There are few Gandhians those who have a bigger influence in tribal zones. They are also, some of them are interacting with the sun, and they are moving towards us. Maoist, yes, it's a problem, and I don't know how they are going to. So, in my view, it is ongoing, unfinished project. It is a difficult project. It is a project like जिसको मैं कहता हूँ शेर पर सवारी करना, and कोई भी organization, if they develop appetite to synthesize the opposites, so you can that is the taste of that organization. And here I'm taking I'm sharing one of the interesting comment by Ranjit Guha when we were in Netherlands, fellow in the same institute, and once Ranjit Guha was talking about America. He said, America has a very strong appetite. किसी को भी पचा लेता है. Now that kind of thing you can see among RSS also. Not अभी आप कह सकते हैं कि it's difficult, sometimes कोई निकल जाता है, अब I tell you protest कर देता है, some may resign from them. These things are happening, practically. But they want to evolve this kind of appetite at social level, at the social level. I'm not saying at the political level, at the level of power, but social level. Like one Pracharek told me, when he's working among Sapiras, and when he goes to work among Sapiras, so he used to eat with them in the evening. And he was not, he was non-vegetarian. He was not non-vegetarian. He was vegetarian, purely vegetarian. And he said he's Dalit. He said, Dalit, by caste Parsi. He's purely vegetarian, but he changed his food habit just to work with them, just to create a kind of. I think I will not going to tell much. Just this, I would like to stop. And yes, anything can happen. Changing society is a big thing, but deepening at social level and samajik bhav, which the term I'm using again and again, samajik bhav, penetration in that is a big effort. It's an outcome of big effort. I'm just focusing on this big effort through which they have entered in the social bhav. They have evolved a language. There is no counter of that language in our politics. Congress had a language, but now that language is faded. The leftists had a language, but that language is faded. So there is a need, those who want to counter them, they need to evolve another language, which may be very close to the people's psyche, people's memory, people's traditions and culture. Yes, I will take that.
Thank you so much, Badriji. We already have overshot by 15 minutes. This was a fascinating discussion. I learned a great deal. I'm sorry I couldn't bring other questions in the discussion, but hopefully you'll get a chance to listen to this conversation and read Badriji's book, Republic of Hindutva, and perhaps email him and ask him more questions. He will respond. Thank you, Sabha. Thank you, Varghese. Thank you, Amit. And just one thing, Badriji basically mentions one quote of Foucault in the beginning. I don't write a book so that it will be the final word. I write a book so that other books are possible, not necessarily written by me. With that quote, I think this is a beginning of a conversation on what is happening in Indian democracy. I have always loved that quote, found it in Badriji's book. I hope some of you will go on the ground and further this conversation. Thank you, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. My pleasure. Thanks.